So firstly, it's an interesting format. I'd like to thank Linaro for putting together the Tech Days. It would have been great to see all of you in person, but you know, sometimes we have to overcome adversity, and again, this is great. I was hoping that if in Budapest to just kind of reintroduce myself in my new role at NUVIA, and kind of walk a lot of you through this in person in terms of our approach and how we think we're going to do things differently. So today we'll fill in a little bit for that, and hopefully we'll all get to see each other pretty soon and continue these conversations. So my name is Jon Masters. I used to be at Red Hat for a very long time, for about the last 14 years. And in the fall of last year, I left Red Hat and joined a startup called NUVIA. And what we're trying to do is enter the ARM server space and do things just a little bit differently. So this presentation will talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing as a company, what it is that you're going to see from us over the next few years, and then what our approach is going to be. I do have the chat up here on a separate screen, so if you have questions, you can type them, and then we'll take questions at the end, but we'll also, if they're really pertinent, we'll stop and answer them as we go. Okay, I'm trying to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is not too marketing-y. I did get a couple of these slides from our head of marketing, so just give me a couple of these to give you the kind of background. So we talk about how there's a perfect storm brewing in the industry, right? There's increasing amounts of data being processed, particularly in the cloud. So there's a growing and kind of insatiable appetite for compelling data center server offerings. We've seen a lot of interest over the past few years, particularly in the emerging ARM server space, and we see tremendous opportunity in the years ahead, borne out by the growth that's happening in the data center space. And what I mean by perfect storm is that you're seeing simultaneously a growth in performance in the mobile space, right? So it used to be that when you got when you looked at the advances in the industry, what would happen is that one of the big incumbents, whose name I don't need to mention, every year would give you a new and faster processor, right? And you saw a lot of innovation happening, being led by one or two big incumbents in the traditional PC space over the last few decades. And then over the last 10 years, what you've seen is a rise in performance leadership that's been happening in the mobile space, and that's informed by many other changes. So, for example, the slide says Moore's law has slowed and is slowing. I go as far myself as to say Moore's law is dead. Others have different opinions, but no matter how you look at it, it's no longer the case that you kind of get these cheap and easy performance wins every year, right? You actually have to innovate beyond just better manufacturing to get improvements over time. It's getting worse, not better. So, we've seen talk from some of the vendors about going from one process node to another, that they would achieve this over the years, and then we've seen delay after delay after delay. But even beyond that, what you're seeing is just that the cost of going to leading manufacturing technologies is increasing over time as well, right? So increasingly, that is not the escape valve that gets you from one generation to the next. You need to innovate beyond that. There have been execution problems, and then we've been stuck with a lot of legacy stuff. And those of us who've believed in the emerging opportunity for new architectures, right? The reason that we always thought that there were these opportunities was that we were looking at this landscape 10 years ago, and we were saying, wow, what if we could take all of the things we've learned in mobile and in these other segments and apply them to server. And so, of course, groups like the Linaro Enterprise Group and now the Data Center Group, and I believe it's being renamed to Data Center and Cloud. But the efforts inside Linaro have been an example of this, where Linaro engaged early to go and help define some of the standards and some of the foundational pieces that we are now going to leverage. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So as I said, you've basically had a past where you've had manufacturing that's improved year on year or every other year. You've had a certain amount of architectural innovation. So what I mean by architectural innovation is the actual design of these processors has improved over time. But there really was a golden age where we were getting 52% year on year performance advances, and over the last few years that's really leveled off. And what we think is that there's a huge opportunity if somebody were to come in with a completely new way of doing the architecture side of things, and also to embrace some of the changes happening in terms of heterogeneous computing with accelerators and so on. If you were to really come in with a fresh perspective in terms of fresh architecture, you actually could do a lot. And this is borne out if you look at the kind of the data for the past few years. So this graph shows relative performance over the past 5 years between the industry leading x86 processor and the industry leading ARM SoC. So this is not actually an ARM server SoC. This is actually a mobile design. And what you're seeing is ARM is catching up. And in fact, if you were to extrapolate this graph and play it out over time, you would see that there's a lot of potential there for ARM that's just starting to be realized. If you add in, the other SoCs that have been in the market so far. Now, there's a lot of great stuff happening, and I'm not trying to diminish anything that's happened so far. I think there's some great players in the ARM space so far. But if you look at the opportunity, if you were to take a fresh approach, there's tremendous room there to take some of these learnings from the mobile space and apply them differently and get that kind of performance leadership and really take x86 head on. So that's what we're trying to do at NUVIA. And I'll walk through now kind of how we're doing that and what it is that we're doing. So a little bit about NUVIA first as a company. So we announced in November that we exist. We announced our Series A funding of $53 million. And we have a leadership team that's in part formed by the 3 founders that you see here. So John Bruno, Gerard Williams, and Manu Giladi. They are industry veterans that have worked for major companies, including Apple, AMD, and Google, amongst many others over the years. Now, Gerard, the person in the middle, who's my boss, led the design of every single one of the industry-leading Apple processors that you've seen over the past 10 years. And the other founders are just as talented and capable. So it's an interesting collection of people. When you extend this out to the kinds of talent, and I'm trying to exclude myself here, but when you look at the kinds of people that they've pulled into the company, it's very interesting for such an early stage. So we are now more than 120 people, having just announced in November. I was employee number 50 in November. We're now at 120 plus people, and we continue to grow. These are the kinds of companies that people have come from who are in NUVIA. So it's a kind of very broad landscape of different players. Not exclusively embedded by background. A lot of us have extensive experience in the data center and the server space. And we're just bringing everything that we've learned from the past into what we're trying to do at NUVIA. So what is our vision? What are we actually trying to do, right? So what we want to do is we want to create the world's best server processor, period, right? So our goal is to win on every metric, right? Performance, energy efficiency, and TCO, right? So when we say that we want to lead in these metrics, it's not relative to a mobile part or relative to all of the other ARM processors, for example. The goal is to win across the industry against anything else that's in market today. I'll talk a bit more about exactly how we're going to achieve that. One of the philosophies that we're bringing to this is really embracing hardware and software teams working closely together. So, in a kind of traditional environment, and we've all seen these, you have kind of your hardware team sitting off to one side, and you have your software organization, and they sort of fight each other, right? And they say, oh, well, those hardware people or all those software people. And you end up with a lot of this kind of needless friction between organizations. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to embrace just having everybody, collaborate as openly as possible together. And so I came up with this line here: the only barriers we support are those defined by the architecture. And I intend to live that. So, it's the only thing that's banned inside the company is referring to people as all those hardware people or those software people, right? We're all just trying to do the same thing together. And that means if you're working on software, you have the ability to go and, look at the design and understand why something's behaving a certain way. And if you are working on hardware, you have the ability to come talk to people that are working on software and understand, what their needs are. And we're trying to inform one another rather than have a kind of adversarial relationship that we have seen sometimes in the past. What you'll see from us. So you'll see meaningful single thread performance leadership, right? So what we're planning to do is we're planning to bring a product to market in the not too distant future that will be disruptively better in terms of single thread performance. So the disruptive doesn't mean 5% better or 10% better or 20% better than everything else that you could get today or by the time we're in market. Disruptive means a lot better in terms of single thread, right? Not multi-core, single thread performance. One of our ground rules is that we cannot do this using a magic compiler or by changing software. So we run the software that's already there. Whether it's good, bad, other, we will come in with opinions on how it is that we'd like software to change. We will be data driven. So we will say, for example, hey, it'd be really great if we had this interface or mechanism that we could use to improve performance. But whenever we do that, we'll try to do it based on data, and we'll try to do it based on collaboration and using and embracing industry standards to do it. So we're not excluding the idea of getting performance benefit by making changes to software, but that is not what we need to do in order to realize our goals. And we plan also to have genuine engagement, right? So when I say that we want to work with communities and ecosystems such as everyone here today, I really mean that, right? I spent 14 years of my life in Red Hat, living and breathing open source. I still live and breathe open source. I still truly embrace all of those philosophies. I truly believe in the value of Linaro and the value of doing things the right way, which isn't always the easy way. And when I say we want to work with everyone here, I really, really actually do mean that. What else you'll see? So I don't know if Mark Hambleton is here today, but in honor of Mark Hambleton, we have the unicorn slide. But unicorns are real in this case, right? So what you will get from us is an embracement of industry standards. right? So everyone knows me as someone who's a standards fan. This design that we're building is fully SBSA, SBBR, server ready. It complies with all of the ARM standards. It is, in that sense, one of the most fabulously boring things you've seen in your life, right? That is my goal. Other goals that we have are to be fully upstream in Linux on day one, actually day zero, right? Ahead of time. So when we are in market, you will be able to run an unmodified upstream Linux kernel, right? No hacks, no kludges, no nonsense, right? No, here's our wacky random patch that you need. Now we know that we could have, errata, we could have issues, people do, okay, and we'll deal with that, but we'll deal with that again in a upstream focused manner, right? If we need to come back and need to ask for something, we will engage and we will do it the right way. Our goal is to support all standards-based operating systems out of the box. So you get a very boring server from us that just works. You turn it on, you put the operating system of your choice on that machine, and you have a fabulous non-experience, right? That's what we're planning to do. Beyond that, what you'll see is meaningful upstream engagement from us. So we are in the process of building our hardware and software teams. I own the software organization, and what I'm trying to do is hire people that are very focused on upstream and understand the benefit and the value of upstream. So as an example, I can hire 10 people that go and build custom versions of all kinds of stuff, and then I have to go and support all of that, right? Or I can hire 10 people that go and work on doing this the right way upstream and engaging with the downstream operating system vendors and communities and so on. I'm going to get more return on investment if I do it the way that goes through upstream than I am if I go and try to do something special. So you won't see something special from us. We will remove barriers to collaboration. So you will see us engaging in discussions. You will see documentation, actually useful documentation from us. You will be able to come back to us and call us out when we don't do that, right? So we are going to try to live up to these goals. And if you find that, hey, those folks over there are building something and I don't know how that works or what's going on here and I can't support that, we actually plan to engage, take that feedback and go and make meaningful changes whenever people see things that are needlessly impeding progress. Other things that you'll get from us, right? So you'll get a fully open source firmware stack, right? So when you get one of our systems, you will be able to rebuild everything that's running on that from the reset vector on, right? So yes, we're using ARM trusted firmware. Yes, we're using Tiana Core. Yes, we're ACPI based and so on. But if you have a platform and you want to go and rebuild all of these components, you will get a reference from us, right? So in the same way that Linaro has built its reference stacks in the past, you will get reference software from us. But what you won't get is, you have to run this blob, you can't change anything. What you instead will get from us is, here is the reference build that we did so that you can turn your machine on. And we built it using this Git hash from this upstream repository on this date. And if you want to go and rebuild it, you have all of the pieces to go and do that from yourself, for yourself, right? Or make changes or improve it, and we will collaborate and engage there. In fact, that will be our default mode of operation, right? So if you want to go and iterate with us, you will be able to do that using the upstream focused points. And yes, we do have a plan to get hardware available for developers, right? I'm not in a position today to share the details on that, but we do understand the need for affordable developer platforms. We do understand that that's something that is very important. And we will also work with all of the usual kind of suspects there. So yes, we'll engage with people like Packet and others over time to make sure that you have access to hardware as well. So I'm going to summarize because I want to give time for some questions. So we are going to build a full custom standards-based ARM server SoC, right? It's a full custom core, full custom SoC. It's fully ARM ISA compliant. It's fully compliant with SBSA and SBBR. It will pass server ready. It will have all of the standard stickers and logos, and it will be the most fabulously boring standards compliant server you've ever seen, while simultaneously leading in terms of performance across the industry, and also being incredibly easy for data centers to adopt. We plan to build reference platforms that exercise these designs, and then we plan to engage aggressively with our early customers. And we have, big, customers already in place, the kinds of cloud companies and so on that you could imagine. And so you'll be hearing more from us about that over time, but you can expect to get some very interesting stuff, I hope, over the next few years. I'd like to leave a couple minutes open for questions if anybody has them. I'm seeing some on the chat. So let's see. Are you targeting server, desktop, or laptop? So the design we have, if we were to take our design and put it into any of those spaces, it would lead in terms of performance and energy efficiency today. No holds barred. But we are not choosing at this point to enter the desktop or laptop space. So while you will likely see, developer type systems more on the workstation side from us, we don't have any plans to share today as far as, desktop or laptop or clamshell type systems. I saw Marcin was asking that question, but, if you want to replace your existing workstation with something a bit more standard, yes, there will be an option there. It will have more cores, it will support more memory, and it will have a lot of very standard I/O interfaces. So we believe a lot more in a high performance PCI and memory than we do in lots of custom widgets and so on as well. So again, this will be a very, very standard server. Can you give any insights into the architecture changes to improve single thread performance? From Mark, that's challenging. What I can say is that this is the biggest and most complex design I've ever seen. I've seen dozens of different server designs over the years. Gerard builds things very differently. He's very well known in the industry for building industry-leading machines. He describes them in terms of beautiful ideas like ocean waves moving through machines and so on. We'll go into a bit more detail, obviously, about the architectural changes, but this will not look, from a microarchitecture point of view, this doesn't look like anything you've seen before. This is not a transmitter type machine. This is a very, in some sense, traditional machine, but in other senses, it's very different than anything that is out there today. Pipeline is very different. Things are very differently designed. I look forward to being able to share more on that, I guess. Question here. Are the extensions, there's a lot of ARM v8 extensions. Are we starting to look like a lot like the x86 feature creep? Yes, I think that's true. I think that ARM is certainly growing complexity over time. We are, of course, working with ARM and the other partners to ensure that that doesn't get too out of hand. I don't think it's too far out of hand today. I think we need to be very careful. I think there are benefits every time we add some new feature, but there's also costs. So we need to be very careful, just really carefully monitoring that over time. And then how do we compare to the competition? I'll make that my final comment. Look, I worked with, friends at Ampere and Marvell over the past few years. I plan to continue to work with everybody out there. We're a startup, so we probably won't be, joining Linaro immediately. But what I will say is I'm not in the business of kind of attacking the other ARM vendors. I really embrace the founding philosophy of the data center group inside Linaro, which was a bunch of pirates in the Bay attacking the Royal Navy, right? I think we all know who the Royal Navy is. And I think, the pirates attacking each other don't tend to benefit. So what we'll do instead is we'll just engage with our industry peers and partners. And what we'll do is we'll try to be a rising tide that lifts all the boats together. And that will extend to the contributions that we make as well. You'll see upstream contributions from us that will benefit everybody else. And that's exactly how it should be. So we look forward to working with everybody. I look forward to seeing all of you next time we have Connect. If you have any more questions, you can reach me using all the usual social media at Jon Masters on Twitter, or jcm@nuviainc.com. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here today.